Maria arrived desperately at the community center, pleading for help for her sick son. But instead of aid, she was cruelly humiliated and rejected. A witness recorded everything, and LeBron James saw it. Eyes turned, voices rose, and within minutes, Maria's fate took a turn no one saw coming. But how did it all happen? And what could LeBron James do to make a difference? Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. The Los Angeles Community Center, intended to provide aid, was in full activity that morning. Maria burst through the front door, her face marked by anguish, having traveled a long way to seek help for her sick son. Maria, a middle-aged woman with eyes that revealed worry and sleepless nights, walked with firm steps toward the assistant's desk. At that station was Eduardo, a middle-aged employee dressed in a simple uniform and wearing an expression that, far from being welcoming, conveyed a pre-established skepticism. The atmosphere was tense, and the light in the center seemed to highlight every detail of the interaction that was about to unfold. "Good morning. How can I help you?" Eduardo asked briefly, without a smile or a hint of empathy. With a voice that was unsteady but determined, Maria began to explain her situation. "I need urgent help for my son," she said, trying to remain calm despite the evident and overwhelming exhaustion. "He has a high fever, has had episodes of seizures, and is struggling to breathe. I have come from very far away, with no one to turn to. I don't know what to do." As she spoke, Maria painfully recalled every obstacle she had overcome to get there, making each word even more desperate. Eduardo, with an authoritative tone and without showing empathy, said, "Ma'am, this center serves those who belong to our community. The rules do not allow exceptions. Seek help elsewhere." The lobby filled with a tense stillness, where every gaze fixed on Maria. However, Maria's face transformed into a mask of pain and courage, as if, in that instant, each tear carried with it the promise not to give up. With a trembling voice, she tried to appeal to his humanity. "Please, sir, understand that I have traveled a long way to get here. I am not asking for a favor. I just need my son to receive the care he so desperately needs. Every passing minute worsens his condition. He could barely sleep because of the fever and the spasms that afflict him." Eduardo, furrowing his brow, made it clear that there was no room for exceptions. "I have explained the situation to you, ma'am. The rules do not allow us to make exceptions." "I cannot help you," he responded, cutting Maria's plea short definitively. Eduardo's rejection turned the community center into a scene of indifference. Maria, standing in front of the counter, with tears on her face and determination in her eyes, clung to hope, convinced that she could not stop in her search for help. That first encounter, marked by urgency and rejection, left an indelible mark on Maria, foreshadowing that her struggle was only just beginning. The atmosphere in the community center had become even more tense. After the brief and cold rejection at the counter, Maria remained standing, her voice still filled with pleading, while the scene around her changed drastically. A group of people, whose faces showed a mix of indifference and arrogance, slowly approached. Their gazes were critical, and their loud, scornful laughter broke the silence of the lobby. It was not the first time that exclusionary attitudes had been noticed in the center, but that open and resounding mockery toward a mother in distress intensified the pain of the situation. The group gathered around Maria, displaying gestures and derisive laughter that revealed their deeply rooted prejudice. Meanwhile, in different areas of the center, other workers remained detached from the scene, seated at desks or handling other procedures. Their faces remained expressionless. The indifference was palpable, None dared to intervene or even offer a gesture of compassion toward the anguished mother. The silence of those employees amplified the feeling of abandonment. It was as if, tacitly, they accepted that Maria's plea did not deserve attention. Despite the mockery and the hostile environment that had taken hold, Maria did not give in. With a determination that contrasted with the mocking tone surrounding her, she raised her voice again, this time with undeniable urgency. "Please listen to me," she exclaimed, letting the tension in her words show. "My son is very sick. He has a high fever and is having seizures. He needs immediate care. I cannot wait." At that moment, just after Maria voiced her desperate plea, a citizen who had remained silent suddenly stood up and stepped between her and the group. With a firm and urgent voice, he said, "Enough with the mockery. We all know how serious this situation is. Your laughter only adds to this mother's suffering." While looking at those who had been laughing until that moment, an uncomfortable silence took over the lobby as the members of the group exchanged glances, and the tension momentarily intensified. Every word Maria uttered was laden with the desperation of a mother who had overcome countless obstacles to reach that place. Her voice, though trembling, sought to reach the depths of those who were watching her. Maria's insistence, amidst a chorus of laughter and complicit silences, highlighted the magnitude of the urgency she was experiencing. Her eyes showed determination, and despite the tears threatening to spill, she kept speaking, hoping that perhaps someone would recognize the imminent danger her son was in. The clash between the group's mockery and Maria's determined voice heightened the tension, reflecting a system that ignored the urgency of her plea. That moment marked the beginning of her struggle. Maria, with tears and determination, knew that her search for help was only just beginning, despite the relentless rejection. A sturdily built man pushed his way through the crowd and, without waiting for Maria to finish, shouted in a scornful tone, "You have no right to come here and bother decent people. What are you looking for, pity?" His words abruptly interrupted Maria and diverted the group's attention. The interruption left the mother in a forced pause, compelled to stop her account as all eyes focused on the man and his audacity. Shortly after, Security Officer Ramirez, dressed in the center's official uniform, joined the group, positioning himself near the counter with an impassive gaze that reinforced the rejection. His presence added institutional weight, making it clear that Maria was not expected to continue her request. The combination of the offensive remarks and the officer's presence created an atmosphere where any attempt at dialogue or appeal to empathy seemed to vanish amid unyielding attitudes. Maria began to sob, her broken voice reflecting the pain and helplessness of seeing her plea silenced by hostility. Despite her fear, her determination did not waver. The community center, which in theory was supposed to be a place of support and assistance, had turned into a stage for confrontation. The offensive comments and the officer's inflexible stance created an almost insurmountable barrier for the mother. Even so, Maria kept her gaze steady, and her voice, though faltering, continued striving to reach anyone who might offer even a glimpse of compassion. Amid the turmoil that had settled in the community center, when tension seemed frozen in every gaze and gesture, a new element emerged from the crowd. Among those present, a middle-aged man with a determined expression and eyes reflecting both astonishment and indignation discreetly took out his mobile phone. His name was Andres, and at that precise moment, he realized that what was happening deserved to be documented. With steady movements, he began recording the scene, capturing every detail. Maria's face marked by pain, the disdainful attitudes of some present, and the atmosphere heavy with conflict that permeated the lobby. The video Andres recorded openly displayed the unjustified rejection, the raised voices, and the hostile environment. Without hesitation, while still holding the attention of those in the room, he uploaded the footage to one of the most widely used social media platforms in the city. Within minutes, the image of the community center and the anguish of a mother seeking help spread at an unprecedented speed. The platform was flooded with views and shares, and the information rapidly extended beyond the walls of the building. The response from the local community was immediate. Every comment, every like, and every new post reflected growing outrage. Neighbors, regular social media users, and citizens in general began expressing their shock and anger at the injustice captured in the video. Social media was filled with emphatic messages such as, "What helplessness! If I were at the center, I would stand up to defend that woman and demand that she gets the help her child needs. Don't those $% hashtag and $% have mothers? I can't believe what I'm seeing. If I were there, I would immediately speak up and stop this humiliation. No one should be treated this way." The video spread triggered a wave of reactions. The messages transformed into a collective outcry, with many demanding answers and calling for the urgent attention that Maria and her son needed. The outrage was clear and forceful. What had initially seemed like an isolated incident had become a reflection of a deeper issue in the treatment of vulnerable people. The response on social media became so intense that it was no longer just about denouncing the injustice. It was about taking concrete action. Additional comments demanded $hashtag% hashtag and hashtag. How dare they gang up against that poor woman? If I were there, all hell would break loose. This is infuriating. Nobody is standing up to defend the woman. Suddenly, the roar of motorcycles was heard approaching the community center. Moments later, a threatening-looking motorcyclist, tattooed and wearing dark sunglasses, entered the lobby and stopped about 4 meters from Andres. He lowered his glasses, revealing an intimidating gaze, and after a few seconds, he silently left the center. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Andres stepped out of the lobby and approached the entrance. There, he saw several motorcyclists with the same menacing appearance gathered near the door. The atmosphere grew even tenser when one of them stepped forward and gave him a threatening gesture that made it clear he was not welcome. Sensing that his safety might be at risk, Andres decided not to take the chance of identifying them and quickly returned inside the community center. This brief but impactful encounter left behind a sense of unease and the certainty that there were forces willing to silence the truth. Andres' visual testimony had ignited a spark in the collective conscience, making it clear that the injustice captured in that moment would not be forgotten. The rapid spread of the video and the surge of online reactions created an environment where the pursuit of answers and justice became increasingly urgent, promising that the next steps would not be long in coming. In a secluded corner of the bustling community center, where tension could still be felt in the air, Maria found a brief respite to immerse herself in her memories. Although the chaos and pressure of the moment surrounded her, her mind kept replaying the early moments of that day, which had set the course for everything that had happened. Maria delved into the memory of those first hours of the day, where every instant was marked by anguish and the unbreakable love she felt for her son, Juan. The previous night had been long and filled with uncertainty. While the rest of the neighborhood slept, Maria stayed awake beside the small bed, watching every movement of 6-year-old Juan with a heavy heart. The boy had been coughing violently and intermittently, his breathing sometimes becoming labored. His pale, cold skin revealed the deterioration of his condition. With trembling hands, Maria cradled him, gently rubbing his back and whispering words of comfort, promising him that she would do everything possible to ease his suffering. At the break of dawn, as the first rays of sunlight barely illuminated their modest home, Maria gathered her courage and determination, despite her lack of sleep and the constant fear of seeing Juan's condition worsen. With the little she had, she set out to prepare a simple breakfast filled with tenderness and hope. In the small kitchen, with worn utensils and modest ingredients, Maria toasted a few slices of bread and peeled a piece of fruit, striving to make the moment warm and comforting. As she placed the breakfast on a simple plate, she knelt beside Juan and, her voice trembling with emotion, said, "Son, I promise I will do everything in my power to help you get better. Even though we don't have much money, I love you." The child, resting against his mother's lap, nodded with a gaze that blended exhaustion with absolute trust in her. With her heart weighed down by worry, Maria knew she had to seek help. She set out through the neighborhood in search of a local clinic where she could find the medical attention they so desperately needed. The journey was arduous, and the air was cold. When she finally arrived at the small clinic, she was met with long lines of people and an overwhelmed service, unable to provide immediate assistance. Despite her frustration, the memory of the sleepless night and her son's vulnerability drove her to keep going. After waiting at the clinic, Maria was forced to repeatedly call health centers. With trembling hands and a distressed voice, she discovered that in every call, there was either no available care or the cost was unattainable. That succession of rejections heightened her helplessness and the fear that each passing minute put Juan's health at greater risk. In her desperation, Maria decided to act on her own. She carefully gathered the little she had, selling personal belongings and sacrificing essentials, and summoned the courage to turn to Don Ernesto, a trusted neighbor. Urgently, she explained Juan's critical situation, and he, with sincere compassion, offered her a small loan that ignited a spark of hope within her. At last, after painstakingly collecting the necessary amount for the fare, Maria felt a mixture of relief and fear. With her heart racing and the determination to save Juan, she took her bag. Before leaving, she stopped to speak with her trusted neighbor, Anna, who offered to take care of Juan during her absence. With that reassurance in mind and fully aware that every second counted, Maria headed toward the door, knowing that this journey was her last hope. As she stepped out of her house, right after saying goodbye to her neighbor Anna, Maria felt a chill of unease. As she walked toward the bus stop, she noticed a car approaching rapidly down the street. For a few seconds, a figure briefly appeared at the car window, fixing their gaze on her. That instant, filled with panic, made Maria's heart beat even faster. Without hesitation, she quickened her pace, aware that every second mattered to save Juan. In that memory, every detail remained vivid. The echo of the fruitless calls, the sacrifice of parting with the little they had, and the tense preparation for the journey. Maria, her gaze fixed on the uncertain future, carried within her the strength of a mother willing to overcome every obstacle for her child's well-being. That morning, despite fear and uncertainty, became the starting point of a struggle that was far from over. And with every step she took, the unconditional love that drove her never to give up was reflected. The video had spread at an unforeseen speed. Within minutes, thousands of messages of outrage flooded social media. Strong and condemnatory comments followed one after another on every post, and the evidence of the injustice captured at the community center sparked a collective response from the community. Social media users shared the video with precise descriptions of what had happened, as indignation turned into an urgent call to action. Alerted by the digital response, community leaders quickly mobilized. They called for an immediate demonstration in front of the center, ensuring the participation of everyone. However, as the minutes passed, uncertainty hung in the air. Among the organizers, some feared that the call to action would not have enough impact, that the outrage on social media would fade without real consequences. "What if no one shows up?" murmured an activist, anxiously looking at his phone. The president of the neighborhood association clenched her fists. "They will come. They have to come," she said, but even in her voice, a shadow of doubt crept in. Meanwhile, influential figures in the city began using their digital platforms to amplify the situation. A well-known journalist published a detailed statement on his official account, urging the center's administration to answer for its actions. Other political leaders and representatives of social organizations shared the video along with statements emphasizing the need for immediate accountability and measures to ensure respect and dignity in the treatment of citizens. The messages were forceful and clear. Justice and transparency were being demanded. Citizen pressure was not limited to social media. At the same time, an online petition was launched on a widely recognized platform, demanding immediate sanctions, and it quickly gathered thousands of signatures. The interaction between the calls for outrage, the actions of community leaders, and the support of influential figures intensified the pressure on local authorities. The community, united by the desire for justice, was preparing to demand that responsibility and transparency prevail, making it clear that this incident would not go unnoticed and that every citizen had the right to be treated with respect and dignity. Over the course of the day, the echo of the incident reached the highest levels of local administration. In a conference room at City Hall, under the watchful eyes of journalists and community representatives, the tension was palpable. The journalists exchanged uneasy glances. The community representatives, impatient, waited for someone to speak. For a few seconds, the silence in the room became unbearable. Finally, a high-ranking official cleared his throat, took a deep breath, and with a tense expression, leaned toward the microphone. "This incident reflects structural problems in the care of our most vulnerable citizens," he declared firmly, emphasizing that a thorough investigation would be launched and that those responsible would face sanctions. While the authorities articulated their commitment to act, in a gym near the scene of the event, LeBron James continued with his training routine. As he trained, LeBron received an alert on his phone. Playing the video, each image and word reflected the harshness of Maria's rejection, awakening in him a firm determination. Seeing the images of Maria, a woman struggling to get help for her son amid adversity, LeBron couldn't help but think of his own mother, Gloria Marie James. The image of that strong, determined woman reminded him of his family's humble beginnings, the time when, despite scarcity, his mother instilled in him the values of resilience and solidarity. That personal memory, filled with lessons and sacrifice, ignited in him a renewed commitment to act against injustice. As the video played on, his jaw tightened. Without realizing it, he gripped the towel in his hand tightly, crumpling it in his fist. His breathing grew heavier. A mix of fury and disbelief overwhelmed him. It wasn't just outrage, it was personal. In a sudden motion, he dropped the towel and grabbed his phone. He couldn't stay still, not after seeing that. Aware of the weight of the social responsibility his figure represented, LeBron was determined to act against what he considered an abuse of power. As he continued reviewing the recording, the seriousness on his face confirmed that he was about to take actions that would go beyond the realm of sports and into the sphere of social justice. In two settings as different as City Hall and the gym, the response to injustice took on a decisive dimension. Local authorities took on the case with the seriousness it demanded, while one of the most influential figures in the world committed himself to confronting the situation. LeBron James needed only a few seconds to grasp the gravity of the situation. Without wasting time, he dialed his communications chief's number. "I need a public statement right now. Make it clear, this is unacceptable." His tone was firm, determined. There was no room for indifference. As he spoke, he was already visualizing the impact his statement would have on social media and public opinion. Condemning the event was not enough. Action was needed. He ended the call and turned to a group of people training nearby. Among them, an old friend, an activist and civil rights attorney, watched him curiously. "Set up a meeting right now," LeBron instructed. "We need to coordinate this with the right people." In less than 10 minutes, the gym's improvised conference room had become a command center. Lawyers, activists, and members of a local civil rights organization gathered. Some had not yet seen the video. LeBron played it on his phone screen. A tense silence followed. "This cannot go unanswered," an activist said, breaking the pause. Quick strategies were proposed: a forceful message in the media, pressure on the authorities, and, if necessary, an immediate presence at the community center. "Where exactly did this happen?" someone asked. 5 minutes from here," one of the lawyers replied. That piece of information changed the atmosphere. There was no need to wait, no need for further planning. LeBron stood up, his heart racing. For an instant, he thought about the consequences. If he got personally involved, it could unleash a media storm. His PR team always warned him about these matters. "Don't expose yourself too much. You can't fight every battle." But then he looked at the video once more. The image of Maria, discriminated against and unprotected, reminded him of his own mother once, and it hit him like a punch. He took a deep breath. There was nothing to think about. "I'm going there." The others followed him without hesitation. Outside, indignation was about to turn into action. LeBron walked out of the gym with a firm stride. Just 5 minutes from the community center, each step reflected his determination. The weight of injustice drove him forward. As he moved along the sidewalk, LeBron came across a group of protesters who had gathered along the street. They were determined citizens who, with signs in hand and clear slogans, demanded justice for Maria. Their voices rose with strength and conviction, filling the air with a collective outcry that echoed through every corner of the neighborhood. LeBron hurried toward the community center. As he approached the entrance, the sight of a large crowd gathered in front of the building made him stop in his tracks. A group of rough-looking bikers glanced at him and decided to leave. People of all ages had assembled, some holding signs, others with expectant gazes, forming an imposing force that reflected both the community's outrage and hope. LeBron paused for a few seconds before entering, observing how every face, every gesture, and every word merged into a silent cry for accountability. The decision to leave the gym and join the march now revealed itself as a decisive step in a process that was about to bring significant change. Then, a woman ran out of the center, her eyes filled with tears. She was a worker from the place. LeBron intercepted her. "What happened in there?" he asked firmly. The woman hesitated, her trembling hands searching for something in her bag. She pulled out a handkerchief and clenched it in anger. We couldn't do anything. They treated her worse than a dog. LeBron felt a burning sensation in his chest. That only strengthened his determination. Amid the gathering that had formed in front of the community center, a protest spokesperson pushed his way through the crowd. He was a middle-aged man who approached LeBron and, with a grave voice, said, "What they did to Maria is unacceptable. The community is here because it demands justice." Driven by the information and the passion in the spokesperson's voice, LeBron stepped out of the security zone surrounding him and walked, step by step, toward the counter where the rejection had taken place. The murmuring of the crowd faded. Everyone held their breath as they watched the basketball star cross the invisible barrier that separated the outraged from those responsible. LeBron advanced with a firm stride. This was not a symbolic gesture. He was there to demand answers. Upon reaching the counter, he stopped and, leaving no room for doubt, demanded explanations from those responsible. With an unwavering gaze and a steady voice, he asked for the situation to be clarified. "What justification do you have for treating a mother seeking help for her child this way? Why were such discriminatory actions allowed?" LeBron's words echoed in the expectant silence of the crowd. Faced with the imposing presence of the athlete and the evident pressure from the community, the administration of the center became visibly uncomfortable. One of the officials swallowed hard and stammered, "It's just that we have protocols. She didn't meet the requirements." LeBron cut him off immediately, his voice resonating in the silence. "Protocols? It's a sick child. Since when is a piece of paper more important than a child's life?" A murmur of indignation rippled through the crowd. Some people began to raise their voices, demanding answers. A child, holding his mother's hand, looked up at LeBron with eyes full of hope. The tension grew. The crowd watched closely as LeBron waited for concrete answers, marking a crucial point in the confrontation that promised to change the course of events. LeBron's intervention had completely changed the atmosphere in the community center. The crowd, impressed by the firmness of his action, erupted in applause and cheers, expressing unanimous rejection of the injustice committed against Maria. Each clap and shout of support reflected the community's indignation and commitment, making it clear that discrimination would no longer be tolerated. For a moment, the room fell into tense silence. The officials exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to do. Outside, the crowd continued shouting, demanding justice. Maria, her hands still trembling, felt fear tightening her chest once again. What if, despite everything, they still refused to help her? Her throat closed when she saw one of the employees lean toward the security officer, as if seeking his support. The guard crossed his arms, watching the scene with a hard expression. LeBron frowned and took a step forward. "Are you going to do the right thing or not?" he asked firmly. The pressure was unbearable. Maria felt her heart pounding, each beat a reminder of what was at stake. Under mounting public pressure, the center's administration was forced to act immediately. With a firm voice and in a coordinated manner, the officials announced that they would provide urgent assistance to Maria. However, it was known that Juan, Maria's son, was not with her, as his fragile health had forced him to stay home. Aware of the gravity of the situation, the administration immediately arranged for an ambulance to pick up Juan and transport him to the center, where he would receive the much-needed medical attention. Maria, her eyes filled with tears, covered her face with her hands, unable to believe that someone was finally helping her. Her body trembled between relief and exhaustion. When the official assured her that the ambulance was already on its way, She nodded repeatedly, unable to speak, until, with a broken voice, she whispered, "Thank you, thank you." Meanwhile, an official escorted Maria to an office to register her case and coordinate Juan's medical care as quickly as possible. At the same time, an official investigation was launched to clarify every aspect of the incident and ensure accountability for what had happened. Amid the fervor and overwhelming reaction of the community, several citizens who had initially sided against Maria were identified. With tense faces and critical stares, some members of the crowd confronted these individuals directly, questioning their hostile actions. Enraged by the injustice and discrimination exposed by the incident, the community openly expressed its repudiation, making it clear that such attitudes would not be tolerated. Under the weight of collective pressure and feeling the discomfort of their own actions, the accused individuals chose to quietly leave the community center. The scene was charged with palpable intensity. The coordinated response between the deployment of the ambulance service and the formalization of medical care demonstrated that social pressure had transformed inaction into a genuine commitment to justice. Every action taken reaffirmed that the community and the authorities, driven by the outcry of those demanding respect and dignity, were willing to change the course of a situation that, until then, had seemed hopeless. The inescapable response not only represented a step toward repairing the harm done, but also marked the beginning of a process aimed at protecting the most vulnerable and preventing future injustices. LeBron James met with Maria in a designated area of the community center, now transformed by social pressure. With a firm step and a serene expression, he approached the mother as she waited for her son's medical care to be formalized. Upon meeting, LeBron extended his hand in a gesture of solidarity and, with a calm but conviction-filled voice, conveyed words of support and encouragement. During that conversation, the athlete realized that Maria's life was not so different from that of his own mother, Gloria Marie James, who had faced humble beginnings and similar challenges. That revelation awakened in LeBron a deep empathy, reaffirming his commitment to fighting against injustice and extending a hand to those who, like Maria, were trapped in an unequal system. Shortly after, the sound of the siren broke through the murmurs of the crowd. The ambulance arrived at the community center, and the paramedics quickly got out. Maria ran toward them as they carefully unloaded Juan, now stable but still weak. His small body seemed even more fragile, wrapped in a blanket, but his breathing was steady. LeBron remained by her side, watching as the doctors took him inside to receive the care he had previously been denied. Maria took LeBron's hand in a gesture of silent gratitude, her eyes reflecting both the exhaustion of the struggle and the renewed hope that moment brought her. For the first time in a long while, she felt she was not alone. Juan, still weak, clung to his mother, and in his childlike gaze, a spark of relief shone. LeBron, with the image of his own mother in mind, leaned slightly and said in a low voice, "No one should have to fight this hard to be treated with dignity." Maria nodded, a lump forming in her throat. That day had not only changed her fate and her son's, but unknowingly, her story had become the voice of many others who endured the same in silence. Then, with determination, LeBron stepped out to the entrance of the center. Outside, the crowd anxiously awaited news. With a calm yet firm gesture, he raised his hand, and silence fell. Then, he turned his phone toward the crowd and showed a freshly taken image. Juan now on a stretcher, receiving care from the doctors. "He is in good hands," he said, his voice resonating with the same strength as his presence. "Maria is with him." A collective sigh rippled through the crowd. Some applauded, others let out tears of relief. What had begun as outrage was now transforming into something greater: the certainty that unity could change realities. The news of LeBron's intervention and the immediate change at the center spread rapidly on a national level. The media echoed every detail, broadcasting the image of a man who had stood up against abuse of power and discrimination. If this story moved you, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss more inspiring content. Share this video with friends and family who need to see stories that challenge perspectives and leave an indelible mark. Explore our channel to discover stories that inspire and transform. Until the next video. Ultimately, the incident marked a turning point in the city. What had begun as an isolated case turned into the start of a movement aimed at eradicating discriminatory practices in public services. With each signature, each debate, and each act of solidarity, the city committed itself to reviewing and reforming its institutions, setting a precedent for justice and equity.